John chapter 5. John chapter 5. Read the first 15 verses. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these 5 porches, lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down in a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the waters, stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there, which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, took up his bed, and walked, and on the same day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore, because it was the Sabbath, said unto him that was cured, It is the Sabbath day. It is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed. He answered them, He that made me whole, the same said unto me, Take up thy bed and walk. Then asked they him, What man is that which said unto thee, Take up thy bed and walk? And he that was healed wist not who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away, a multitude being in that place. Afterward, Jesus findeth him in the temple, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. The man departed, and told the Jews that it was Jesus which had made him whole. John's gospel is different than the other 3, in that his primary intent is not to give a historical account of Christ's earthly life, but his whole intent is to exalt the deity of Christ's person. So John is the only one of the 4 gospel writers to record this particular event. There are 8 miracles recorded by John. 6 of them are exclusive to him. He turns water into wine. We've already seen that. Jesus heals a nobleman's son. We've seen that one as well as also. Jesus here heals an invalid. Jesus feeds a multitude. Jesus walks on water, heals a blind man, raises Lazarus from the dead. There's another miraculous catch of fishes. Those are the 8 miracles recorded by John. Of those, 2, only 2, are not exclusive to John. And that would be the feeding of the multitude and Jesus walking on the water. The other 6 are exclusive to John. So this is one of those miracles that is exclusive to John. And again, just like in all the miracles, we see Jesus showing up in places of impossibilities, in places of great need, places of sickness, places of disease and weakness and brokenness, places of helplessness and hopelessness. And He's in these places to do what only He can do. And He's in these places greater than whatever the situation is. And that is the case before us. So in this particular miracle, Jesus comes to and heals a man who had been lame for 38 years. Again, many will teach that this man lay by the pool for 38 years. That's not what it says. We don't know how long he lay by the pool. He was lame for 38 years. He may have only been by the pool the one day. I don't know. But he was lame for 38 years. And what we have here is a story of a miraculous, life-changing event. But again, it's more than just a historical record. The Lord has chosen to preserve it in His Word, to typify, to illustrate the greatest, the most magnificent, the most amazing, the most awe-inspiring miracle of all, the salvation of a sinner. So let's look first of all at the scene and setting of this miracle, keeping in mind that it typifies the greatest miracle of all, the salvation of a sinner. The account begins with some generalities concerning occasion, place, and time. We see it occurred, verse 1, during a feast of the Jews. We don't know which feast. There are 7 feasts of the Jews. All of these feasts, of course, point people to Jesus Christ. You have the feast of the Passover. You have the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of first fruits, the feast of Pentecost, the feast of the trumpets, the feast of atonement, the feast of the tabernacles. It was one of those feast days. And each of these feasts speak of something of the redemptive work of Jesus Christ. Again, John does not record which feast was being observed at this time. But John also speaks of the fact that this particular miracle took place on the Sabbath day. And we see that in verse 9, and we see it again in verse 10. And we know that the place of the miracle was in Jerusalem. Those are all generalities that we gather from verse 1. Our attention is drawn in verse 2 to the precise place of the miracle. Again, the first thing mentioned concerning the place is it's Jerusalem. But then he gets more precise. And he mentions the sheep market, or the sheep gate. That's the gate in the wall of Jerusalem through which the sacrificial animals were brought into the temple and would have been northeast of the temple. There by this gate was a pool, and it was called Bethesda, which simply means the house of mercy. Now this pool was engineered, constructed by man, and no doubt it was a renowned place. And we are told that around this pool were 5 porches, 5 covered places. So the setting of the text is a feast of the Jews at Jerusalem by the sheep market, which was near the temple where sacrifices were offered. So it is a religious setting. And then our attention is drawn to a multitude of people in verse 3. we read, in these 5 porches that were around the pool, lay, that tells what they were doing, they were just lying there, lay a great multitude of impotent folk. And the general description of this multitude is that they were impotent. That's the general description, which simply conveys the idea of that they were weak. They were in a very feeble and disabled condition. This, of course, as a result of a variety of disease and other problems. And then the specifics are given concerning this multitude. Some of them were blind. That is, they lived in darkness. Some of them were halt. They were lame. They were crippled. Some were withered. That means paralysis. So we see them there. In these 5 porches, a multitude of people. They're all just lying there. And these are people who are not well. These are people that are not going to get better on their own. So there are 5 porches, 5 covered places, a pool of water, and in these 5 porches are a multitude. And what are they doing? It says that they're simply waiting. They're waiting for something. What they're waiting for is the moving of the water. And the reason for that is stated in verse 4. For an angel went down in a certain season into the pool and troubled the water, and whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. So, this is a very sad and pitiful scene. A multitude of people sitting, lying in these porches, and I believe they portray the fallen and the unsaved in their lost and ruined state. They also portray the sad condition that God's people can succumb to. So we picture the scene. A vast crowd, disabled. They are in desperate need of a miraculous healing. And they're there hoping to be the right person in the right place at the right time. And there they sit, there they lie, staring at a pool of water, just waiting for something to happen. And we see them there, they're trapped in their condition. They're trapped in their state. This is their life. Our attention is then drawn to a certain man that belonged to this multitude. We see that in verse 5. And a certain man was there. Where? In this multitude. In one of the 5 porches. Before the pool of water, staring at the water. A certain man was there. And we are told of this man that he had an infirmity. That is, again, he was feeble. He was in a weakened condition. And this condition was so real, so certain, that he is referred to in verse 7 as simply the impotent man, or the disabled man. This was his identity. This was his life. We're told in verse 5 that he had been in this condition for 38 years. For 38 years, he's been in this feeble and decrepit condition. And again, he wasn't getting any better. And he's not going to get better on his own. From what is said in verse 7, he said in response to Christ, I have no man to put me into the pool. And from the command given to him from Christ in verse 8, rise, take up thy bed, and walk. And from what we read of his healing in verse 9, and immediately the man was made whole. Notice the result of being made whole. He took up his bed and he walked. So from all of that, we can surmise that this man was a crippled. He wasn't blind, he was a crippled. He was a crippled man. And again, he was so for 38 years. Now most assume, I don't know why you would assume it, but most assume that he was 38 years old. Well, it doesn't say that. He might have been 70. He might have been 39. He might have been 38. The issue is he was a crippled for 38 years. And we see him, verse 6, lying down when Jesus saw him lie. And we are told he had been a long time in that case or that condition. That condition. Again, the account does not say at what point in his life he became infirm. He's been infirm for 38 years. Perhaps he was this way from birth. It's possible. Or perhaps there was a time when he was in vigorous health. But regardless, after 38 years, this man has learned to live the life of a crippled. There's no doubt about that. It is now his life. 38 years. 38 years being a crippled. He is now accustomed to living life this way. This is his life. For 38 years, this man was crippled. And there he is, lying in one of the porches, staring at the pool. It is a picture of a very sad life. Jesus, verse 6, asked this man a simple question. Wilt thou be made whole? And the man's response in verse 7 reveals some more details about his terrible condition. He said, Sir, I have no man. You need to see those words. I have no man. I have no one. When the water is troubled, that tells us what he's trusting in, to put me into the pool. So we see him there. He's in this terrible condition and state. He's helpless. And he's helpless in and of himself to change his condition and state. And there is no one to help him escape his situation. Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. It is a picture of hopelessness. And what we have here is a picture of the unsaved. That brings us to point number 2. Enter Jesus. There came a day when Jesus came to this multitude of the sick, the diseased, the frail, the infirm, the blind, the paralyzed, the crippled. And He came to that multitude for one particular man. There was a certain man. So Jesus comes to the place. And from verses 6 through 9, that Jesus has arrived at the place of this multitude and has arrived at the place of this particular man belonging to the multitude is very obvious. Again, don't forget the scene. 5 porches. In these 5 porches lay a great multitude of impotent folk. That's the general description. Feeble and weakened. Some of these were blind. Some were halt or crippled. Some were withered or paralyzed. And they're waiting for the moving of the water. And there they lie, staring at a pool of water, waiting for something to happen, trapped in their condition. And here comes Jesus. Here He comes. He's God in a human body of flesh. And He's amongst this multitude. And He's there for this particular man. He's greater than all that is represented in that multitude. He's more than all that is represented in that multitude. And He is there in the midst of what is a very pitiful scene. We see Him there. He's the Savior. He's the Redeemer. He's the Shepherd. He's the friend of sinners. We see Him there as God's provision, as God's remedy, as God's solution for the desperate needs of the people. And He's there. And He is the one who can cure anyone in that multitude. He is there as the one who can restore, who can correct, who can deliver and strengthen. Again, the scene is a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. But now Jesus is there. And there is no condition, there is no situation, there is no circumstance that He is not the remedy for. Looking at the multitude, we see difficulties and trials, variety of plagues and afflictions, sorrows and wounds. But the entire scene changes. Jesus is there. And again, He's greater than, and He's more than all that are in those porches. He is there. And He can. He can transform the lives of the entire multitude. He could have one mass healing. He could transform every single one of them. He's there. And He has and He is what everyone in that multitude needs. Again in verse 5, our attention is drawn to a certain man. And that's why Jesus is there. He's there for him. All in that multitude need the healing of Jesus Christ. But Jesus is there for a certain man. Just like when you and I were saved. We lived amongst the unsaved. Jesus came to where we were for us in particular. He's there for this man. He's among the sick. He's among the diseased. He's among the frail and the infirm and the blind and the paralyzed and the crippled. But He's there to bring deliverance to this particular man. Not because this man had something to offer that the others didn't. Not because this man was better than the others, but simply because of grace and mercy. Jesus comes to where this man is. Now notice what Jesus does. He initiates a conversation with this man. As Jesus comes to the multitude, there's no record of anyone crying out to Him. Jesus initiates a conversation. He says, "Wilt thou? Are you desirous to be made whole?" The question reveals that what the man needed. What did he need? He needed wholeness. He needed wholeness. It is also revealed that this would require the work of another. Notice that between thou and whole is the word made. Wilt thou be made whole? A power in work outside of this man. Wilt thou be made whole? He did not say, wilt thou be whole? That's not what he said. Wilt thou be made whole? He's speaking of a miraculous transformation. Do you desire a miraculous transformation? A transformation from an infirmity 38 years to whole. That's the transformation. From 38 years of infirmity to whole. And this would require the work of another. And then Jesus, in love, grace, mercy, and power, said to him in verse 8, "Rise, take up thy bed, and walk." So we see the actual healing of this man in verses 8 and verse 9. When Jesus said, "Rise, take up thy bed, and walk," it was a command to do what this man could not do in and of himself. He couldn't do any of these things in and of himself. But those words were not merely a command. They were words of effectual power. Because it's declared in verse 9. And immediately, the man was what? Made whole. It's not immediately the man became whole. He did, but he was made whole. Why did he become whole? Because he was made whole. There was a work that took place. It wasn't something he did. He was made whole. It's not something that's attributed to him and has the result of being made whole by the power of Christ. He rose. He rose. That was the result of being made whole. He rises from his bed as a result of being whole. I believe he did so without a struggle. There was no struggle. As a result of a mighty working within, he's come out of his lying position upon his bed. And he's standing. He's standing. And I believe his feet are firmly planted. He's not unbalanced. He's not tottering. But there he stands. And then he bent down and he took up his bed. So there he is. He's standing and he's holding his bed and he walked. He rose from his bed. He bent down, picked up his bed, and now look at him. He's carrying his bed and he is walking. All proof that this man has been made whole. All of this is a result of being made whole. So you look at him, he's carrying his bed, he's walking. What does that mean? Coordination has been restored. After 38 years, this is an amazing thing. The man is not only walking, but he's carrying his bed walking. Coordination has been restored. And I believe he's doing so without difficulty, without struggle. He's carrying his bed without difficulty and without struggle. He's walking without difficulty and without struggle. And I don't believe he's doing any of this tentatively. The paralysis, the problem has been taken away. He has been made anew. And we see him. And he walks through that multitude of the sick, the diseased, the frail, the infirm, the blind, the paralyzed, and the crippled. And all the joy that fills his soul as he moves past 38 years of infirmity. He's moving past that. He's been made a new man. And as a result of being made whole, he's leaving his past life. He's leaving that life. He's been set free. Verses 10 through 13. He meets the opposition of the religious world. It's an amazing thing. When an individual is truly saved, they are not only going to meet the opposition of the world at large, they are going to meet the opposition of the religious world. But in spite of the opposition, he continues to carry his bed and walk. They said, "Who healed thee? Who told you that you could carry your bed on the Sabbath day?" Verse 11, his response was a very logical one. He said, "He that made me whole." Notice he fully realized that he had been made whole by another. He didn't take any credit to himself. He fully realized, and I believe everyone who's truly saved at the moment fully realizes it, that he was made whole by another. He said the same, the very same one who made me whole, said unto me, take up thy bed and walk. So it just made sense to me. He made me whole. He told me what to do, so I did it. Notice again, he did not say, he that made me whole said unto me. That's not what he said. He said, he that made me whole the same said unto me. That's for emphasis. King James Version is very good at that. It's one of the beautiful things. It's not a waste, it's not unnecessary usage of words. There's emphasis. He's emphasizing the fact that he was made whole by a power outside of himself. And he's emphasizing the fact that he needed no other reason than the one who made him whole to carry his bed. Because he told me to. I don't need any other reason. And you and I don't need any other reason to obey than he that saved my soul told me to do this. It's the only reason you need. So the one who made him whole defines his activity. And so it should be with you and I. This man is motivated, he's moved, he's inspired by the one who made him whole. He was propelled and driven by the one who made him whole. Verse 14, we see this man who had for a long time lived on the porch and trapped in this condition, in the mindset and the culture of the porches. He's now in the temple. He's in the temple. So he carried his bed, he walked into the temple. He's no longer what he was, and he's no longer where he was. This man, whose life had been one of infirmity, disappointment, and despair, now he has peace, he has joy, he has victory. He has been miraculously raised from life on the porches. He has been miraculously raised from 38 years of lameness. And now he's in the place of praise and worship. And I don't believe anyone had to tell him, you ought to go over to the temple. That's where he wanted to be. And it was while in that temple, he's worshiping, that Jesus came to him again. And as a result, this man comes to learn more about Jesus and how he was made whole. What Jesus said to him is recorded in verse 14. Behold, thou art made whole. Behold, thou art made whole. Be aware that you've been made whole. No one else made you whole but me. Behold, you've been made whole. Thou art made whole. Present tense. He's calling him to be aware of the fact that his wholeness was due to the work of another. It was a work outside of himself. He's calling upon him to be cognizant of the fact that he is a miracle as a result of a miracle worker. Jesus went on to say to the man by way of warning, sin no more, lest the worst thing come unto thee. Then we read the man departed. That is, he departed the temple. The joy, the thrill, is bubbling over. And he goes to the opposing religious crowd. And with great boldness and assurance, great passion and excitement, filled with thanksgiving and praise, we hear him say, "It was Jesus. It was Jesus which made me whole." You ask me who it was? It was Jesus who made me whole. It was Jesus. This man has gone from "He that made me whole" to "It was Jesus." There is a growth in his knowledge of what transpired in his life. And he's giving all the praise and all the honor and all the glory to the one who made him whole. And for all who are saved, don't ever forget, it was Jesus. It was Jesus. It was him. May we grow more and more in this knowledge. It was Jesus. This man has been brought to this knowledge. It was Jesus. Many folk that need to be brought to that knowledge. It was Jesus. Well, I made a decision. It was Jesus. I decided. It was Jesus. May we grow more and more in that knowledge. And may it be more, and if we do, it will be more and more of our motivation and our inspiration and our driving force in our life. It was Jesus. Brother Ben, if you'll come and lead us in verse of song.